Trigger warning, this podcast contains mature themes and discussions of cults, manipulation, and trauma. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Culttmatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking, where we expose the dark side of control, manipulation, and the human stories behind them. I'm Anonymous Andrew, executive producer and investigator into cult dynamics and coercive control.
And I'm Melody, a cult survivor and advocate for awareness and healing.
This is Culttmatum. Greetings and welcome back to another exciting episode of Culttmatum Podcast, a culture of cults and human trafficking. And my name is Anonymous Andrew, and tonight with me I have my co-host Melody. Hello, Melody.
Hello, Andrew. Today we are joined by Nikki G, a survivor of 5 different cults, including Honey Child Ministries and the International House of Prayer. She's now a certified trauma recovery coach, speaker, and educator specializing in religious trauma, spiritual abuse, and cult recovery. Nikki is also the co-host of the podcast, Surviving the Black Church. We're grateful to have her here with us today. Nikki, welcome to Culttmatum.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, our pleasure. And I don't know if anybody caught that, but 5 cults. That's
Yeah.
that's a lot. In we're approaching 100 episodes, and I don't think we've had anybody in more than 2 cults. So
Yeah,
this
I
should
don't
be
think so
interesting.
either.
So no, right? So Nikki, take it away.
Well, I mean, since we're talking about it is a term called cult hopping, and it happens more than people would like to admit. Um, for me, growing up in a narcissistic family system, I would consider myself kind of primed for to being attracted to and attracted by different cult leaders and things of that nature. And I would even say a religious narcissistic family system. So I was raised in church when I was little, going to church, staying late nights for prayer meetings or choir rehearsal as a child. And so religion and Christianity specifically was the epicenter of my family system. But I didn't get saved and make it personal until I was around 19. And funny story how I got saved, it wasn't me going down, the aisle and responding to an altar call to make Jesus my savior. I got saved by reading conspiracy theory books in college around 18, 19 years old. And I just devoured as many books as I could, talking about the New World Order and Illuminati and the 13 bloodlines and all this stuff. And it intrigued me so much. I just kind of went down the rabbit's hole, so to speak, with that. And as I was doing that, a lot of material I was reading kept bringing me back to certain books in the Bible, the book of Revelation, Ezekiel, a lot of end time apocalyptic uh, books in the Bible. And so as I started to consume that, I came up with the premise that, well, seems like some of this stuff is going to happen, the mark of the beast and all this other stuff. And it seems like Jesus is the only way to kind of get out of this safely. Well, guess what? In my basement at the age of 19, I said, okay, I'm going to make you savior. I'll be, you be my Lord. I'll be obedient. And I just need you to make sure I'm not going through this stuff. I mean, that sounds crass, but that was kind of my mindset at that age. But I took it seriously. And so I stopped smoking weed and going to the clubs and hanging out, and I started going to the church I was raised in. And I would go to Bible study, and it kind of shocked my parents because I was a little wild child, as my parents say, growing up. And I just started to change like instantaneously. And I just started reading the Bible, getting involved, to the point that I was asked to lead the youth group. And it went from like maybe 10 people there or what have you, and it grew to like 60 in less than a month. And so with that, I got involved, heavily involved, changing my life, started evangelizing to people. And, really taking this seriously. And then a group of young people came to visit my church that I grew up in. And, they were what I call on fire for God. And I was like, ooh, what is that? I want that. I started visiting their church and then I became a member there. And that is the first cult, Honey Child Ministries. When I got involved with that, I did not know that it was a cult, as most people don't know. It was just a lot of love, a lot of place where I felt like I could belong. The leaders, paid attention to me. They took time to like really pour into my life. And the leader was a woman, and her husband was the person that led the ministry of music, so they say in the typical Black church. And this was a predominantly Black cult, a storefront church, if you will, very small. I would say under 100 people. But the young people really felt like they were on fire for God and they really were taking things seriously. And so I loved being in that environment. And, this is where I started to learn about my gifting, so to speak. And this is where the leader spoke into my life. And this is also where my daughter, who is 24 years old, the cult leader is her grandma. So if you can imagine what that was like to have a grandchild by the cult leader, obviously it ended not so good. And it got to the point where the cult leader physically, assaulted me for me to basically say, you know what, I don't need to be here anymore. It was hard for me because I ingested a lot of the teachings that is where I was supposed to be, that God was going to move in that particular church. And to leave, I had to leave, you know how it is, leaving cults, the community. And
Yes.
then, I was labeled with, having my own demon. So the leaders told the people, don't connect with Nikki. She has a spirit on her and you don't want to basically get infected with the spirit. And so I, became a single mom and had to deal with trying to make sense of that whole ordeal. Yeah,
I
Melody,
do
you,
have a
you want to
quick
say something?
question. Yeah, I have a quick
Yeah.
question. So if the cult leader was your child's grandmother, does that mean
Mhm.
that you were like her son was your boyfriend or your
Uh-huh,
husband
uh-huh.
or oh, okay,
Yeah,
that's how that
boyfriend.
okay. So you
We
ended up
wanted to get
with
mhm.
him while you were in the cult, not before.
Not before, I met him
Okay.
in the cult, and, he and I wanted to get married, but the cult leader forbade it, and, put me through a lot of hell when I went through carrying my daughter. It was a whole ordeal. I had plans to actually abort her and everything, and, I mean, I know a lot of people may or may not believe in certain supernatural instances, but I'll just leave it at that to say, a situation occurred where I knew I had the appointment and everything. I knew that I couldn't do it. And so she's 24 years old today and thriving. And yeah, but she went through all of the cult experiences that I endured, the five that I endured with me. So obviously at that time she was young, but I eventually left, and how I started to process that experience was I spiritualized it. When I left, I had to leave. Why? Because there's some type of spirit going on there. I hadn't yet rationalized that this was a cult, and
Right.
so in my mind, it was like this bad spirit, Jezebel spirit, whatever spirit you want to pull from the Bible
So
text.
the fact that you
I
hadn't figured out it was tactics is the reason that you probably ended up in another cult because you hadn't figured out the
right.
cycle. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's what typically happens with, survivors who cold hop. It's just like someone in, a romantic relationship. If you don't process what you came out of, more than likely you'll attract the same type of person, just a different body. And because I thought, though, I was processing correctly because I was spiritualizing it. At that point, I was
Right.
taught, I don't have to look at psychological terms. I don't have to go to therapy. I'm gonna figure this out in the Bible and in the Bible only. So in my mind, I thought I was processing, but I was spiritualizing it in the process.
Like to just address one topic. It's a little bit off topic, but it's to your story. I got to be careful how I word this. So you had gotten pregnant and
Mhm.
you were faced with whether or not to keep the baby?
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. So I found myself in that 28 years ago.
Mm.
I was married, divorced,
Mhm.
had 2 children from that marriage,
Mhm.
went dating and got a baby mama pregnant.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't believe in abortion in my faith and in my morality,
Mhm.
but it wasn't my choice. It was the
Yeah.
mother's choice, and I do believe in
Mm.
pro-choice.
Mhm.
While I don't believe in it, I believe that you have the right to do that.
Mm.
I went to her and I said, "What do you wanna do?" And she said, "Well, I've never had children, and this is the chance I'm gonna have, but I don't know if I really." She had some issues, mental issues and medical issues, and she
Mhm.
said, "I just don't know if I wanna bring that child into the world." Long story short, we did. We brought
Mm.
the child into the world,
Mm.
and to this day, it was the best decision, and he
Mm.
is a wonderful, amazing human being,
Mhm.
and just to think that there is something out there today that you can pop a pill or go to a doctor's office and end that life that could be, it's just amazing that, I'm making a statement, a political statement, I guess, and I probably should be very careful. I'm not I'm not pro-choice, and I'm not pro or anti-abortion
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
just telling my side of a story
Yeah.
of a pregnancy and an abortion, and I'm just
Mhm.
very happy that I did not abort my 3rd son, so
Mhm. And I can totally relate to that as far as me not doing what I had intended on doing, you know,
you
I'll
don't regret it.
I don't regret it. Remind me later off camera, I'll tell you her name because that even
Okay,
has a lot to do with that whole experience.
great.
But at that point in my life, I was very, pro-life even though I was thinking about, going through that situation. And I'll get into that later as far as the different movements I got involved in, being in, this cultic vortex, if you will, for a big chunk of my life. And so, like I said, I spiritualized it. I left that place. I did not lose my faith. So I found a couple of churches that were not cults, but they weren't perfect either. And so, I was like, okay, this is good. I'm okay. But because I cut my teeth on end time type teachings and the first cult that I just talked about was very charismatic, very, it was non-denominational, but it's very charismatic, speaking in tongues, gifts of the spirit, intensity. Because I cut my teeth that way, when I went to churches that were somewhat safer or healthier, I was bored. I did not like being in those places long term. I felt like, well, this is not the move of God. God doesn't have his hand on this particular ministry. Like, what are we doing? I wasn't satisfied, is what I'm saying. Mhm.
What does speaking in tongues mean to you? What did that mean?
Well, at that time, what we were taught was it was the presence of the Holy Spirit kind of embodying you or awakening you, and out of that, feeling and that emotion, you had the utterance of a different language and things of that nature, and so that was very, very prominent in that first cult, really all the cults I was in, to be honest.
So did you speak in tongues?
I did. I did.
Did you know what you were saying?
No. Oh,
No. Well,
well, I take that a few times I did.
okay.
A few times I did, and which was, odd to me, like,
Right, that's
yeah, the fact that I knew what I was saying, which,
okay.
that's a whole 'nother that's a whole 'nother subject, but
We
what I
don't
Go ahead.
we don't hear that a lot on the podcast about speaking in tongues.
Mhm,
That melody, right? I don't think it's come up too
It's
often.
been in a couple episodes, but no, it's not been
Couple
something we
mhm,
focused on a
so
lot or hear a lot.
mhm,
and I was just curious, what does that I mean, of course, I've heard it. You hear it in the Bible, and when I was brought up,
mhm,
we heard that speaking, but that's usually somebody who's possessed. They speak in tongues, like the devil is speaking to them, and they
mhm,
speak all of a sudden, they speak Latin, and,
mhm.
but the kid's 8 years old. How do they know Latin?
Right.
So I was just curious, but all right.
No, 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 that's a good topic because sometimes people, once they're, post-cult, if they do not connect with the religion anymore, or, some people become atheists, some people just like, I don't know. Sometimes people don't know what to do with certain things like that, certain, experiences, like that. I have a whole lot of thoughts around that, but, yes, at that point I did, and as I would go forward in these other cults, I was experiencing more than just speaking in tongues. The prophetic, spiritual warfare, all of that stuff. I was heavily involved in, and it started in the first cult too. But as I got into deeper cults, it was more apparent, and, I got deeper into all that. So, went to these healthier churches, but it wasn't enough. I wasn't satisfied, and so I eventually found out about, the International House of Prayer in Kansas City. I don't recall how I found out, but I remember because I'm originally from Jersey, and so I'm in Jersey, and I'm just watching this ministry on stream and seeing that they have a 24/7 prayer room that had been going on since 1999. And I just was, again, a group of young adults on fire for God, really trying to live this thing out. And I was just wowed. And I started to get into the teachings and listen to a lot of it. And then I think, was it 2009, I decided to go and visit myself with a friend. I just was like, I know this is a place I'm supposed to be. I'm going to bring my daughter. She was young at the time, and I figured it out. And in 2010, I moved to Kansas City to be a part of this ministry. And so,
That
yeah.
that's a long way to go for a group.
Oh, absolutely. And that is a thing I've learned about my temperament. At the time, I did not realize all of that. When I believe something, I'm kinda, like, all in. It's
Right.
usually not in the middle, and so because I know this about myself now I'm a little bit more, tempered, if you will, in trying to make sure that I'm in more balance. Balance is more of a safety mechanism for me than to just be all in for anything,
Oh, I
post-cold.
100% agree and understand. I was thinking about that when you were saying that when you were would go to a regular church after the cult
Mhm.
experience, that you were bored, and I was thinking, I did that with relationships. I got into some really bad
Mm.
relationships, and then when I found
Mhm.
a stable guy, I'm like, "He's boring." He was boring
Yes,
because
yes,
he
this
didn't
happened.
have a bunch of drama. He wasn't stirring
Yeah.
shit up, But at the
Yeah.
time, I was just so used to turmoil that I didn't know what it was
Mhm.
like to be with somebody who was stable and maybe a little boring. But, yeah, and
Mhm.
I think there's a lot to be said for that because, like you said, it's because that pattern, it's now what you've gotten used to, and
Right.
it's what you expect when you walk into an organization, and I can see how that
Mhm.
would cause you to cult hop the same way it would cause you to continue to get into bad relationships till you figure out the pattern, and you're like, "The only thing that is the same here is me, I gotta change something."
Right, right. And, stemming from a religious narcissistic family system, that template is already there before you even
Right.
step foot into, by choice, a different group or congregation or a relationship. But it's all subconscious. We're not aware of that template that's within our body, really within our nervous system. And so we kind of copy and paste through
Yes.
life. Some people may be doing that and they've never stepped foot in a cult. But like to your point, they've been in a ton of bad relationships. And so that's why to kind of tie this part up, only spiritualizing my experience, it helped temporarily, but it did not in the long term. Understanding certain things about trauma and my body and how all this works, attachment styles and things of that nature really helped me personally and then professionally to help support clients.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So how long did it last when you moved to Kansas City? And that
I was there about
was
7.
that with IHOP?
Yes,
That
yes,
okay,
with
you moved
IHOP.
there for okay, so you moved there for IHOP,
For I
and then
moved
how
there for
long
IHOP. I was there about 7 years, and majority of people that are there move from IHOP. So we have people that have come from all over the globe to go to this cult in Kansas City. People have walked away from scholarships at Harvard and Yale and, sports scholarships to be in the prayer room because that is, heralded as the most prominent thing you can do with your life is to sit in that room and bring glory to Jesus. But as I started to deconstruct and learn a lot about the teachings and the structure and the leader and everything like that, it's just I have my opinion, but I would say to the level that the IHOP is structured, to the impact it's had globally, I would put it up there with some big time cults like People's Temple with Jim Jones, minus all of the deaths, obviously. I would put it up there with David Koresh, minus all of the deaths and, law enforcement having to get involved to that degree. It's so big, it's so insidious, it's so invasive, and it's global, this particular cult, that, in my opinion, it is very it's hard for a lot of people to recover. Mhm.
Could you share with us some of the what you now see as either red flags or unhealthy teachings that they had that would make you believe they fit into the bite model of a cult?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. As far as the bite model or the markers, so for one thing, the model, I mean, the actual IHOP, the whole foundation, it was started on Mike Bickle, who was the founder, who had an encounter when he was in Egypt, and some angel came down, and I have ceased to remember all of the prophetic history because that's what was ingrained in us when you first become part of that ministry, to listen to the prophetic history. But that's the foundation of how things got started. This mandate from this leader, from God, to do this, very lofty mandate, a lot of mysticism around it. And so you have that. But as far as the structure in and of itself, it's so vast. A lot of the teachings, were very end time, apocalyptic in nature. If you just look at how people lived their lives, a lot of people left family, friends, and isolated from society to some degree to be full headlong on this ministry, the vision, the goal. There was a lot of elitism as well too, a lot of black and white thinking. There was loaded language. A lot of it, we called it IHOPs. And so if you would go there and you didn't know anybody there, they had a coffee shop on the base or the strip of property that they own, and you go in there, you talk to somebody. If you're not from there or don't know about the ministry, you probably think, "What in the world are they talking about?" 'Cause they just talk with this, for the end times, for the coming of the age, he's sending out forerunner messengers with the harp and bow model, and you're like, I just asked, could you get me a napkin over, from behind you? I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know what you're talking about." But there was a lot of loaded language to the point that, and this is the thing, even though I spiritualized my first cult, things started to feel familiar over time when
Mm.
I was there. Like, I just saw everybody just vying, not only for the main senior leaders' attention and validation, but the ones underneath. And I just saw everybody, it's almost, it was very robotic, and people just sounding the same and becoming something just to get approval. And I didn't understand it on a conscious level, but I was starting to realize this feels familiar.
You were starting to see
Um,
the patterns, at least
I was
subconsciously. In
starting
the back of your mind, you're like,
Yes.
"Hmm, this looks a lot like something I just came from."
Right. A lot of the end times teachings and apocalyptic teachings, it made people basically prepare to live through the rapture. I mean the end times. A lot of people felt like, "Oh, we get raptured out of here, we don't have to deal with that." Their belief system was, "No, we will be here. And God wants to use you during that time as a messenger, as a voice, as a point of a healer or an evangelist." And so that was kind of the premise of needing to be in the prayer room as much. You're storing up the word, you're storing up the love for God and for people, you're storing up in your gifts, speaking in tongues, things of that nature. So during that time when it occurs, you are ready to be sent out in a
Right?
mission type of way and so this caused people to just totally separate from the outside world. It was, not really a good life balance with this. You were just full on immersed in this teaching.
I can relate to that. I don't know a whole lot about IHOP. I have heard of it, but
Mhm.
it sounds very similar to my cult, which was the House of Yahweh out of Abilene, Texas.
Right.
The
Right.
leader was Ezra Hawkins. It's got a lot of similar, teachings
Mhm.
and beliefs and a lot of that end time focus and the loaded language
Mhm.
and always
Mhm.
focusing on storing up food and doing the work of Yahweh and
Mhm.
all of that stuff that keeps you distracted, right? You get
Right.
distracted. So what then was the thing that made you like when you were there, so now you're in IHOP, you're living in Kansas, what was the thing that started to make you feel like you had to leave that group? What was it did you notice there was something deeply wrong enough that you're like, "I've gotta get out of here."
Well, it's very interesting. I didn't fully leave, but
Okay.
I started to slowly, remove my commitment level because I started to see cracks in the foundation. I wasn't satisfied still either. That was a big reason why as well. It was like, okay, this is not enough. They're not doing community right. Everything is always mission minded and you're, leaving the people out and I wanted more. Not to be dismissive of anybody who's had, addictions with drugs, but I would liken it to almost like chasing the dragon of that first hit. Certain places I was hopping to, it just wasn't enough. And so the other cults that I became a part of after IHOP, majority of them were in the Kansas City area. Majority of those leaders had been a part of IHOP at one point. They saw some disparity and some issues, and so these were adjacent shoot offs
Spinoffs,
of
yep.
the bigger, yeah, mhm, and so, I started to visit some of those, and occasionally I would visit the prayer room or visit a service that they had on the weekends. Still believed in a lot of the teachings, I just started to pull back a little bit more communal because things just didn't feel and seem right anymore, and so these other places I would go, the next cult I would go was, very, governmental intercession minded. So, getting back to what you were talking about, Andrew, as far as giftings, this was another thing that I felt like I was gifted in or had a passion for was prayer and intercession. And so most of the places that I connected with online as well as a brick and mortar style cult had a lot of those themes there. And so I was big on praying for the government, big on, going to all night prayer rallies and sessions and really getting involved in this. So this third cult was like that. And it was particularly for the US and a lot of what you see now with Christian nationalism and even Project 2025. I remember praying for these things a
Wow.
decade ago,
So
and
did that
mhm.
cult have a name? Did they have a name or did they go
Yes,
by
they
anything?
they had a name, they are discontinued to this day, but it was called Menorah Christian Center, and it was out in the Kansas City area, and that also they were very, is, praying for the peace of Jerusalem and Israel minded too. So they had more of an Israel worldview and an American worldview, and everything else was like not as important as these two countries to really pray for God's will to be done. So I was involved in, leadership with that and, you know, um, just I was in a lot of stuff.
So
That's why now
was
I
there a
make the
traumatic moment in that one? Was there something that happened? Was there a catalyst that caused you to leave that group to go to the next spinoff?
Well, again, the first part was it wasn't like the first cult where there was physical violence from the leadership where I left. But just like IHOP, I was not satisfied with what I
Mm.
was seeing there. There were the markers of the loaded language. There was the markers of, the behavioral control, the emotional control, what we thought. A lot of it was the teaching. There was so much indoctrination. Now you could go in and out if you want to, but psychologically you wouldn't because of the teachings made you feel like if you were not there, then you were out of God's will. You would, the fear of
You
missing
wouldn't be
out.
saved, yeah.
you wouldn't be saved and things of that nature. And so I was there, but the next cult that I would go to, which I actually feel was probably the worst out of all of them to me, I would then go to this one. It's called Eagles Gates Ministries, and it was also out there and it's also discontinued. And I'm glad I'm mentioning that because, to some listeners out there, you might have attended cults and they're not as big as IHOP. They might be, smaller in size, but you experience a lot of abuse there. And there is nothing to there are no receipts that you can find. You can't tell somebody, hey, pull this up on the website and you'll find it. You can't drive by the church building anymore because maybe it was a house church, which was a cult or had cult markers there, and they are no longer residing there. And so, you're not connected to that community anymore and the people anymore. All you have is the memories, the trauma that may still be, lodged in your body and unprocessed. And so, if you're experienced that or have experienced that, I hope my story can offer some validation. I see you, and there are a lot of people, who are experiencing that too.
You make a really good point, Nikki, and I'm glad you brought that up because another thing they will do, this is a question I have for you. Is that cult kind of still around but has a different name? Because that's another thing
Yes,
that they will
yes,
do, is just
yes,
change their name. So then if once their
yes,
reputation is ruined, then they just change their name and start over with a clean slate.
absolutely. And to your point, I think IHOP is either done that or in the process of doing that. I don't keep up as much as I did since things started to come out about a lot of the sexual abuse and
Yep.
spiritual abuse that was happening that started back in 2023 when things started coming out about the founder Mike Bickle, and things have still been building since to this day. I don't keep up with it as much as I used to, but from my understanding, I know that they were trying to make a name change and rebrand. That is all. A lot of cult leaders do that, or they change the focus, or well, if the congregation is saying, "Well, I thought you prophesied that God was gonna do this." Well, he kinda hit a left. So now we're gonna hit a left, and we're gonna
Right.
change the way we do things, and, at that point, you're so indoctrinated, it may feel weird, but you just kinda follow along with the leadership, and so that was, go ahead, Andrew. Mhm.
Did you have a question, Andrew? No? I don't know if he can hear us.
Can you hear us, Andrew?
I can. I'm
Okay.
looking up IHOP.
Oh,
I do this sometimes when I
Yeah,
get
go for it.
something and I'm not finding anything.
IHOP
Ironically,
IHOP KC.
IHOP KC.
Yes.
Okay.
but
IHOP
you'll get the
KC.
restaurant otherwise.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
Yeah,
You'll get the
IHOP
But
International
I
KC.
House of
know
Pancakes.
I
Yeah,
know it's not the restaurants.
right. IHOPKC.org or .com, I don't remember.
So when you've alluded to one or two times that that I don't know what the word you use, but left them or you said they no longer exist. So and in this podcast, we love to hear when cults just disintegrate, like
Mhm,
when they're either brought down legally or
mhm.
federally or like they're whatever, they're arrested and or sometimes they just fold because people just they just leave. So what happened to IHOP? Was it but you said they rebranded.
They rebranded at one point, they were supposedly closing down the prayer room. I've gotten word that that's not 100% true. They've kind of moved it to another property that they have. Mike Bickle, who was the original founder, had been quote unquote "sat down" or whatever. There's so many allegations that have come out of women who he abused emotionally,
Okay.
spiritually, sexually, all that stuff. I mean, if you put his name in, you'll be able, excuse me, to find a lot of information on him. I don't know. A lot of people did leave. A lot of people left when this stuff has come out, but there's still those faithful few that are so consumed with the mandate and the mission that they believe a lot of this is just, an attack of the enemy, and they need to be faithful to the cause. So there are some that are still remaining, but a lot of people have left. And this is the thing, this particular ministry, like yours, for instance, Melody, was in
Yes.
Abilene,
Yep.
okay? And tremendous hurt, pain, everything. Same thing with David Koresh in Waco. But this cult was in Kansas City, but its reach was global.
Yes.
They were considered like the first house of prayer, if you will. Other places around the world started to create their house of prayer with their prayer room, and they tried to copy the model that was in Kansas City. So when this news started coming out in 2023 about the founder and just a lot of things about, some of the subsequent leaders, this was a ripple globally, and it still is. It still is. So it's not just the people that attended. I was only there for 7 years. This has been going on since 1999. So it's the people who was before me, the people after me, the
Right.
people who are on in
And the
Asia
spin and then
somewhere
you have
that
all the spinoffs to add to it.
you have the spin-offs. You have, so many young adults that were a lot of people left money on the table, big businesses to be a part of this and to find out that this is at the helm of it, and in my opinion, a lot of delusion, fantasies, and these leaders come up with this stuff and they use the people to meet their needs rather than, serve the community.
Okay, so you were in the IHOP for 7 years, then you went to the first spinoff. How long were you there? Not very long?
Okay, so I was in Kansas City for 7 years.
Oh,
I was still a
okay,
part of IHOP here and there, but within that 7-year span, it was IHOP, it was the Menorah, cult, and then it was Eagles Gate.
okay.
And that one started off as a house church, and this was so exclusive, you couldn't just go up in there, you had to be invited in. So
Mm,
I had a friend who knew the type of things that I liked in the body of Christ. We had mutual friends, and she invited me to a prayer meeting one time, and even that was, not typical. In order to go to the prayer meetings at that place, you had to meet with the leaders first so they could see if you would be ready for the spiritual warfare and the attacks that would come from what they do in the prayer time. But I was able to slip past all of that and, go, and, when I got there, I was like, "This is what I'm looking for." You hear the same theme? I
yep.
want more, and this is home, this is where I belong, and, these are my people. So, it was whew, a lot, and the reason why I said this broke me the most because I feel like this particular cult, it the teachings were so ingested and it went at the core of my identity. A lot of the main teachings was, I would say, a romanticism with martyrdom. So there was constant indoctrination that you are going to be a martyr for Christ. Even if it's not um like literally, metaphorically, you need to abase yourself so low that there is nothing left of you so that the Holy Spirit can come and totally take you over and do so, none of you, all of him. And so the prayer meetings and the times we would get together, it was constantly suppression, suppression, suppression. And to the point that you enjoyed it. Like there was a little bit of becoming a masochist, so to speak.
Right.
And this was not just for the adults, this was for the adolescents, this was for the young kids. They got their dose of this too that was palatable for their age, but and then I was very close with the leadership at first, and then, he wasn't one of those type of, and I believe a lot of all the cult leaders are narcissistic,
Right.
but he
We
wasn't
do
the
too.
type that was he wasn't boisterous, he wasn't loud, he wasn't screaming. He was seemingly kind and, compassionate and very, humble, and, so he had this soft charisma about him that just drew you in, and you just felt like, "Wow, this is a man of God," and then he was very, and I'm gonna use the language psychic. In that, arena, I use the word prophetic, but I'm gonna use the word psychic, and so I remember the first time he prophesied over me after I'd been there about a couple of months, and he basically said everything that I told no one. And, a lot of people, when that happens, there's a trauma bond happening almost. There's an attachment that happens almost, and you basically are sealing the deal Usually people don't leave once that type of experience happens. And in a lot of these prophetic, charismatic, evangelical circles, this is just normal, experiences. You get someone to prophesy over you. And he did that, and I was so in love with the ministry that I just was like, "This is home." And, I started to go and attend there more than I did IHOP. I would still go to the prayer room at IHOP, but I wouldn't be involved in a lot of the services and things of that nature. So it was still there, very IHOP adjacent. But,
Okay.
go ahead.
No, I just I guess my next question would be then what what broke you there? What happened there that caused you where you started? Because I'm gonna guess that at least before you left this last one, the Eagle Ridge, is that what it
Mhm.
was?
Eagles Gate,
Before you
it's okay.
left that Eagles Gate, before you left
Mhm.
Eagles Gate, that either before or after you started to see the patterns and realize that, "Oh my gosh, these were all cults."
How can I say this wouldn't to make sense? I saw it, but I didn't see it,
Okay. It
if
was
that makes sense.
still
I
pretty
didn't wanna see it.
subconscious. Yeah, okay.
Yes. You know those things is
Subconsciously.
that we ruminate on and we haven't really articulated? It was one of those
Yes.
things,
Okay. Okay.
right? And because the cult hopping, there wasn't like a gap of time where I really sat and processed a lot of what I was going
Oh,
through. Even
right.
spiritually, I say the first cult probably was the one that I had the most time to process, but I just only spiritualized it. These other ones, there were overlaps. So I really did not have a chance to really assess, "Nikki, what are you doing? These places are not good," and then there was a part of me that didn't wanna believe I'm in another cult. I didn't wanna believe that. I wanted to believe maybe it was me. Maybe I
So at
wasn't
that
praying
point, you
enough,
did
believing
think the
enough.
other ones were cults? You did think the other ones were cults, or had you not thought any of them were
I got
cults yet?
I definitely got to the point where I felt the first one was a cult.
Okay.
And I wasn't at the point where I felt IHOP was a cult because I was still kind of, connecting with IHOP here and there. It
Right.
wasn't until I left Eagles Gate, and there is overlap with me being a part of Eagles Gate and the fifth cult, which is more an online cult. It was not brick and mortar, and that's World for
Okay.
Jesus Ministry, and they're still going on to this day.
Wow.
And again, the same themes: intercession, spiritual warfare, governmental intercession. And what they do is they have prayer gatherings for a week all over the country, sometimes other parts of the world too. I was connected with a lot of the leadership that was there, and it would be 3, 4, 500 people that would go, and the whole week spend hours and hours in worship and then hours and hours in intercession. And then there would be teachings. And if you can imagine a hybrid between conspiracy theory stuff, like watching Alex Jones YouTube videos on a big speaker, the big Jumbotron, and then we would pray some of the things he was talking about and people would prophesy. It was very interesting, and that would happen during those week prayer stints, and then when you're not involved in those, then we had online prayer calls and what they call Joel's Army, and you had prayer cells, and, if you wanted to be on a leadership for this, so myself and my friend, we were involved in that as well too, and a lot of the same markers, but it looked different because it was online. Everything had to filter through the leadership. She was the one, and it was a woman that received, instruction, visions, mandates from God. And we had to follow a lot of that, a lot of loaded language there too, a lot of groupthink, no space for individuality. You couldn't question, and it's similar now that one, as far as a marker of you couldn't really question, cults, they say you can't question. IHOP was slick because they created forums where you could question, but then you would
Mm,
get reprimanded later. And so people watching online, like, wow, they actually have a time where Mike Bickle teaches and you can go up to the microphone and ask him a question. But that was with a twist. He even has a teaching to this day. And I was there when he taught it on signs of a cult.
oh
So
my gosh.
again, that's a play on your mind because it's like, wow, well, this can't be a cult if he taught on it. So, but anyway, this fifth cult, I was a part of that as I was a part of Eagles Gate, as I was a part in a small form
Oh, so
of
okay, so they
IHOP.
were overlapping. So
overlapping.
you had not left IHOP, you
I
had not
hadn't
left
left
Eagles
I
Gate.
hadn't left
You
Kansas
were
City. Yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah.
so you are part of all 3 of those groups at the same time.
And those were the 3 that I was really a part of. But in addition to that, I still was a part of a lot of different conferences, and I would call it I don't know if you've had anybody on here that talked about the New Apostolic Reformation, the NAR movement,
Nope.
Dominionism. Maybe I'll come back and talk about that because that kinda ties a lot of these cults with the political, arena and where we are now. But I was involved in a lot of those. I went to pro-life rallies and prayer rallies. I went to conferences, ingested. So sometimes I'm like, I'm shocked I still have a mind where I want to get pizza and I know what that is because, I mean,
Yeah.
something as small as that, and I laugh at stuff like that, but, to the degree I just took all this in because going back to what I said earlier, Melody, I really believed this stuff. I really believed that these were men and women of God. And I had somebody ask me recently, um, how do people kind of come out of, you know, I would call almost like a spell that's on them when they're in a cult. Some people will say, the cult of Trump, and people are involved in that and they can't see what's in front of them. Not to really get political, but I'm just saying, how do people wake up from that? And I can't say this as a matter of fact, but it's something that I experience, and it's also something I observe. When you have people who are like myself, where I believed through and through these men and women of God were men and women of God, that they really heard from God. I believed everything that they said. So it actually took them what I call wounding me, you know, rejecting me, abandoning me, abusing me where I could not deny it. It had to get so severe. The first cult, it took me having my daughter in my arms as a baby and my cult leader pushing me down the steps with my child in my hand, her grandchild, for me to realize, you know what, Nikki, maybe you shouldn't go back here. It's not safe.
Right,
So for
right.
me, because I believe so big and so hard and love so big and so hard, it's almost like the pendulum had to almost swing, and for me to really experience the dark side of this, for me to say, "Okay, I can't be here anymore. I have to leave." So most of the time, these cults I left out, at least the last one, I left out bleeding and confused, and I said, "Okay, no more groups. We're just gonna sit down and we're gonna figure this out."
Okay, so from that point
Mhm.
to where you are today, because we also did, I don't know if you mentioned podcast Melody in the beginning. So
Yes.
Nikki has a podcast. You must have gone through a deconstruction period. And the podcast. So how long between you left the last one and you started the podcast? How long was your deconstruction in between?
Well,
And
next
how are you
year,
still going through it?
I as a cult survivor, I feel like there's always gonna be something that, you can and then being 5 cults, I mean, I have my work cut out for me.
Yeah, you got quite a few.
But I
Lifelong
balance stuff
deconstruction.
out. Lifelong deconstruction, but you know what? Guys, I'm okay with that. I think that pressure to we have to get ourselves together, deconstruct, reconstruct, or deconstruct and nothing in 2 seconds, that's not reality. I mean, I
No.
put a lot of years to this stuff. And so, but I take it and strides and I actually embrace it now. I don't look at it as a default, a defect or something that's bad. I get to find out who I really am outside of all those spaces. So next year, 2026, will mark 10 years since I officially left Kansas City and
For you.
left
Good.
all of this stuff. I don't know what I'm going to do next year, but I'm going to celebrate. And I go ahead, Andrew.
When did you start the podcast?
Okay.
So it's 10 years is
So
your
10 years,
anniversary.
I was not planning on doing any of this work. I just was trying to get better for myself and my daughter, and that was the intention. I moved out of Kansas City. 2020, when the pandemic started, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the app that came out called Clubhouse, and it was a social audio app only, and a lot of people jumped on it because we were quarantined and everything like that, and I got involved with that. I started sharing my story. I started talking about religious narcissism. I started talking about cults, and people were like, wait a minute, I've been through that. No one's ever said that, so I said, wait a minute, maybe I'm supposed to be doing this a little bit. And so I started a club there called Spiritual Abuse and Cults. And I ran that for 2 years. I actually met a lady who was young and was a part of the Jim Jones cult back then, and she was not on the base at the time, and she's still live to this day, and it was just amazing. But I met a whole lot of people, and that is where I started to hear more stories from people who were in the Black community saying, I don't know where to go after this room. I've been looking for research around spiritual abuse, around religious trauma. How come this is the only space that I can find? And I didn't have the answer to that. I used to run rooms in there for 7 hours, 6 or 7 hours just talking about
Gosh.
this stuff. So I met a colleague, a therapist friend of mine, and we were talking a lot about this, and we were like, we gotta do something. And so in that, myself and my 2 colleagues, we started Surviving the Black Church. And we just started talking about topics because a lot of these things, like this podcast, amazing. I love all the cult podcasts, all the cult documentaries, all the stuff on religious trauma and the books. We're still very new with these topics. So those keep
Yes.
doing what you're doing as long as you can do it, because there's still a lot of people that don't have these resources, but it is slim to none in the Black community. And so that is kind of why we started that work. And we're still trying to get to season 2. But in the interim, we started something where we have support groups, and we've been running that for 2 years for those who are in the Black community who need, community and resources. And it's free. It's on meetup.com. I'll give you guys the links. And people come out of Jehovah Witness situations, people come out of cults in the Black community and the white community, but it's a space where we can, because our stories are different. There's a lot of nuance and cultural differences there. And so,
But
yeah,
yeah, there is, but and you just use the term black and white community. Cults span across the globe from
absolutely.
Korea to Asia
Absolutely.
to Philippines. I mean, they're all the way up in Canada, all the way down in South America.
Right.
Just like addiction has no a boundary, like
Right.
it'll go after anybody, rich, poor, black, white,
Right. Right.
green.
Right.
Go to cults. Cults will go after any. If you, all you have to do is
Absolutely.
be vulnerable,
And human.
lost, human, and
Yes.
it doesn't matter the color of your skin, the color of your hair, the color of your eyes, the where you live, when you grew up, how much money you have. So
Right.
it's just like I hate to. I'm in recovery, so that's why I always go back to that. So it's like a drug addict or an alcoholic.
Hmm. Hmm.
It doesn't care what you
Yeah.
are. It goes
Right.
after you and it grabs you because you're vulnerable at that time. So
Right.
what is we do have to begin to start to wrap up. So
Sure. Sure.
I do want to get some more. So the name of the podcast is what?
Surviving the Black Church podcast. The network for people who want to connect with the support group is called Black Religious Trauma Recovery Network. And there's a meetup group link that you'll find, Andrew and
It'll be
Melanie
in the
will
show
give you.
notes.
Yeah,
Yes.
It'll be in
Vinicius,
the show
yeah.
notes. But
Yep.
to your point, I totally agree with you. And that's why the clients I serve are not only African American or Black. I serve, if you're human, if you've been through this. And I love that. I love all different races and things of that nature. But the reason why myself and my colleagues focus on the Black community, because
Oh,
I know, I know.
you don't have to explain
I'm
that.
just saying,
No, you
yeah.
don't have to explain
The
that. No.
resources, even in the mental health professions, 2 to 4% make up Black faces. And as far as, like, let's say Christianity, 8 out of 10 Black Americans identify as Christians. So the experiences from, the systemic, history of things that we've been through as a people, and many of Black Americans learn how to read by using the Bible. And they learn how to come into Christianity hearing that this is what God wants you to experience, which is slavery. So when you start talking about deconstructing, it's a whole nother layer that needs to be deconstructed. And so myself and my colleagues try to provide resources for that. But then I'm also a part of an organization called Tears of Eden. and that is for spiritual abuse survivors that come out of the evangelical community. I'm on the board for that organization, and I love the work that we do there. So I'm kind of like all over. Keep myself busy, but I enjoy doing this work because I know what it was like. I skipped over a chunk of what that 10 years looked like for me because I know we're out of time. But those 10 years, majority of them was lonely. Majority of them, I
Yeah.
went to therapists and they didn't know what to do with me because they're like, we don't know about cults. We can help you with your PTSD, but that's about it. I said, you know what? I'll take that. But I
Yeah.
had to do the research and I had to move from spiritualizing it to now learning. And so I started to read and watch, resources to help
Well,
me.
there's in many different, what's the word? Um, like for cults, in recovery areas, like
Mhm.
recovering from, let's say, PTSD because you were over in Afghanistan, like so the
Right.
veterans come back, PTSD from, well, not PTSD, but recovering from drugs or alcohol, PTSD from cults, PTSD from sexual abuse, not
Mhm.
maybe not in cults, just like incest survivors or rape
Sure.
survivors. Nobody will know what it was like to walk in your shoes in any of those situations. So when there is somebody out there that's willing to hold your hand, sit down and
Mhm.
do like Melody runs a support group on Facebook for people that are ex cult members. Nobody will know. But I am not a cult survivor, but
Mhm.
I have a wild curiosity, interest in cults, and that's why I started this podcast and I met up with Melody and we
Mhm.
combined our forces.
Mhm.
But nobody's gonna I will never know what you went through and what Melody went through. But like just like the same as like you may not know the shoes that I walked in as an alcoholic and addict, but if you have a family member that
Right.
was an alcoholic or an addict, you do. You do know
Mhm.
because you were
Mhm.
there for that. So
Mhm.
it's a weird world we live in because
Mhm.
of the black and the whites and the gray areas.
Mhm.
So
Can I
but
can
you
I say something about what you just
absolutely.
said though? I wanna highlight you, Andrew, because, you name different addictions, and there is somewhat level of support on a societal level for different type of addictions, but when it comes to this, we're still breaking ground, and I would
Yeah.
even say here in America, it's a little bit more advanced when you go to the UK and things of that nature, but my whole point is, thank you for being an ally. Thank you for being an advocate and speaking up because cult survivors, religious trauma, spiritual abuse survivors, we feel like we don't even know who we are after what we've been through, and we have to learn what happened to us. When someone's been through sexual abuse, they don't have to be told that that's what happened. We have to understand what actually happened to us, and so many people walk away from us in this process. Many people say, I just discard you. I don't understand this, and I don't wanna
Yeah,
understand it."
they
But
look at you like you're broken or you
right,
or
right.
you're less than
You're
or
less
you're
than.
what's the there's another word
Oh.
I'm thinking of.
Well, and I experienced the same thing you experienced, Nikki, when I went to try to get
Mhm,
into counseling. I left my cult back in 1994, but when I went to a
mhm.
counselor, I mean, and I was telling him my story, the man, I think the man wanted to help me, but he looked at me like I had
Right,
3 eyes, and I'm like,
You had no
"This
idea.
man
right,
has no
Yeah.
idea how to help me. This is not gonna be helpful." And I didn't go
right.
back. I did it through self-help books and talking to my mom and my
Yep.
sister. That's how I
Yes.
deprogrammed and deconstructed.
And I
Mhm.
think today, and I mean literally mean today, like 2024, 2025, the psychologist, anybody who's going through psychology to become into the career. Let's say somebody joined, not joined, that went to school in 2020 to become a psychologist, psychiatrist, a therapist, whatever. They're being taught some of the modalities that have been taught for the last 30, 40 years in all different areas, everything from rape to
Mhm.
domestic violence
Mhm.
and maybe just mood disorders, whatever. The cult world, I think that I don't know that you can go into like NYU or pick a major college institution, university, and sit in on a cult class. I don't know. I mean,
It's
I'm
starting to happen.
exactly, that's my
It's
point. It's
starting to
starting to
happen,
happen.
and the language you hear more often is coercive control,
Coercive
Yes.
control,
or high
exactly.
demand groups. So I'm seeing people going for their masters and different things. It's starting to happen. Like I said, I feel like Europe is more advanced as far as
They
where their
always are.
laws with
We're
what they're
so far
doing.
behind.
I know. Well, because whether people believe it or not, this country, as far as what it was founded on and the whole premise and what's on the
Mhm.
dollar bill, and so it's not as, in my opinion, Nikki opinion, as
No, it's
religious over
yeah.
there. So it's easier to say, hey, coercive control in a religious setting is abusing and harming people. We need to get this as something that's illegal to do. That's harder to do over
Right.
here.
It's harder to
So,
prove.
we're just starting to get some traction, but it's still not enough. And that's why your podcasts and podcasts around these topics are so important.
Yes. We
You're 100%.
bring awareness.
Europe and Eastern Europe and Asia are way ahead of us in a lot of areas, including like medicine. But
Mhm.
I'm gonna say something that's so weird and off topic, but just to give the audience and some merit to what you're talking about, just look at some of the trains that they have in Europe and
Phew.
China and Japan, and
Japan,
they
yes.
blow. Good. I don't know if the last time you've been in New York City, but the subway systems and the trains are still from like 1950,
Mhm.
and they
Mhm.
got these silver bullet trains crossing across Europe, and you can get from one side of Europe to the other in like 12 hours or less. Or here across the whatever. I get off on these tangents.
We're gonna talk about that off camera because I
Yeah.
could go off on that one
Yeah,
too.
it's just like, why
I
can't
agree
we
with
catch
you.
up?
Yeah.
Why can't we you go to Japan and see that not that I've been there, but I've seen them. They got these beautiful I'm gonna
Yes.
stop. Nikki, tell us where we can find you online, your social media, and where your podcasts we can hear your podcasts.
.com. You'll be able to go on there and find all my social handles, Instagram, Facebook, and you'll find out what I'm doing next. I am working on creating an online community right now filled with support groups, resources, special guests coming in and speaking. So I'm working on that to launch that in the next couple of months. And so
Awesome.
crossing my fingers with that. But, to wrap it up, I think, to belabor my point, these type of podcasts, the documentaries, the books, it's all necessary. Because Melody, can you imagine 19 years ago if you were able to listen to this podcast or had a book
Oh.
around this content?
Oh, and Nikki,
How,
I would have been it would have been my savior. I would have just been like, "Oh my gosh, there's
yes,
other people going through the same thing, and it's gonna be
yes.
okay on the other side," because I didn't know I was gonna be okay.
Mm-mm,
I
mm-mm.
didn't know
And
where
it's
I was
not your
going.
fault.
Yeah,
In
exactly.
in the podcast world, the when I started podcasting a couple of years, maybe almost 3 years ago,
Mhm,
I looked at other podcasters as colleagues because it was
mhm,
somewhat of a new medium, even though it's been around since like 2010.
mhm.
But it was just starting to catch on. And now it's starting to really branch off into so you got the sports and you got I have a dating
Entertainment.
podcast which
Mhm,
I'm putting to bed
mhm,
and but and they're all starting to compete against each other a little bit.
mhm.
Not like dog eat dog, but the cult realm podcast community is sticking together, I think.
Yes,
And we
yes,
have to. We
yes.
must. So, like Melody and I, we listen to a lot of other cult podcasts
Mhm,
because not just well, one just to hear anything new, we need to know what's going
mhm,
on, but
mhm.
we just want to support them,
Yeah.
and we hope that they support us, and we're going to support you as well. That
And
kind of thing.
thank you for having that heart, because I have the same mindset with that. I believe there's no competition in this particular
No,
field right now because
you
we're
can't.
talking about human
We're
lives
trying to
that have
help
been hurt.
people
We're trying to
exactly.
help people, and honestly, there's so much that has not been spoken about or covered that there's enough for all of us. So there's space
Right.
for your podcast, my
Yeah.
podcast, somebody else's, I mean, I know media, you gotta compete, you gotta look at the downloads and the numbers, but beyond
Yeah.
that, these are lives
Yes.
we're talking about. So
Yeah.
thank you that
Absolutely.
that's still your heart for why you do what you do.
And
It is.
awareness is
It
awareness. We want that
It
awareness
is.
out there, and the more
Mhm.
podcasts there are, the more people are gonna stumble upon these things, and even people who've never been in a cult are gonna learn it, and maybe they won't end up in a cult like we did because they're gonna see all those red
Absolutely.
flags before it happens to
Mhm.
and
them.
Right.
and cults are starting to crumble. It's
Yeah.
like
Yes.
they raided the one world church, I think, a month or
Mhm.
2 ago. Twin
Mhm.
Flames got raided.
Yep.
Yes.
Nexium is closed.
Yep.
We can name 12 different cults.
Mhm.
The Mundo, the leaders are in jail.
One
Mhm.
taste.
So they're One Taste is in
Yeah.
exactly. We had them on the other night. They're starting to crumble, or they're
Yeah.
starting to be taken down by the government finally.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I'll say this, and then we really got to say goodbye. Is Jehovah's Witnesses? They're
Yes.
fleeing in the thousands.
Yes. Yes.
Just so,
Yes.
which is
And the
great, 'cause
and the governing bodies are still trying to change the rules to
yeah,
try to
because
get
they
Yeah.
people to
can't get
come back.
Yeah,
but it's not
exactly.
gonna happen.
They're
It's
like,
not
Mhm.
gonna happen.
wait a
Mhm.
minute, we'll change that rule if you guys come back and pay your tithes."
No,
Yeah,
too
see?
late, too
Too
late.
late, too late. People are waking up. So keep doing what you're doing with
Thank
this
you.
We will.
podcast. I
N
appreciate, all
Nikki,
the work
thank
you're
you so
doing.
much for coming on, and
Mhm.
maybe we should have you back one day, because I think you
Yeah.
have a lot more.
Yeah,
For
I
sure.
do. I
Yeah.
haven't even scratched the surface.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
we'll have you back.
Maybe we'll have you
Okay.
Alright?
back to talk about your coaching and all that other stuff. That would be
Yeah,
another good
sure.
episode. We'll go
Excellent.
that avenue the
Mhm.
next time, but
Mhm.
wow. Thank you so much, Nikki, for coming on the show,
You're
and we appreciate you.
welcome.
And once again, we wanna thank Nikki so much for coming on the show and sharing her experience of all her different cults, and,
Wow.
yeah, and I think
5.
yeah, isn't that insane? I can't believe she was able to fit that all in an hour, but she did a pretty good job of, explaining how she hopped from one to another, and
Yeah, just to the audience, we did speak to her before we recorded about maybe doing a part 2, and so I think we will have her back, because she does have
yeah.
so much more to talk about, and she's doing such a great job out there. I think she deserves a part 2. I think she
Oh, yeah,
deserves
and
at least
especially
another hour.
especially, to talk about some of her trauma
Hmm.
recovery coaching,
Yep.
stuff, and I'm sure she has lots of tools she could share with our audience with that. That would be a really good episode, so
Yeah.
we'll definitely have to do that. I'm gonna have to write myself a little Post-it note and get back with her after the holidays here,
So,
and we'll get
to
that
the
taken care of.
audience, if you like that and you want to hear more of that, just stay tuned. I think we'll try to make it
Yes.
happen, like we just said, in the beginning of the new year. So sometime in January, or maybe February 2026, we'll make that happen for
Yes.
you,
For sure,
if all
for
the
sure.
ducks and stars and everything align up correctly.
Yes, yes, and we thank Nikki for offering that. Thank her for coming on the show today, and as always, we thank all of you for tuning in to Culttmatum. We do appreciate your support in our mission to expose the truth and highlight the voices of these survivors.
If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple and Spotify, and don't forget to follow the show, share, and keep listening to all of our latest episodes.
You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and YouTube for more content and updates.
Don't forget to join our Facebook group, Culttmatum Podcast, where we dive deeper into these important topics.
And if you're a cult survivor and you're looking for additional support, you can join the Cult Escape and Healing Group on Facebook.
If you're interested in more of my work, or the studios that basically produces Culttmatum, it's Anonymous Andrew Podcast Studios.com. And over there, you'll just get all the information about upcoming things with just the studios and Culttmatum in general. Go over there and check it out.
And if you have a story related to cults or human trafficking that you would like to share with us, please email us at culttmatumpodcast@gmail.com.
If you like to help support the show, you can help us cover our production costs by buying us a cup of coffee. The link is in the show notes. Just click on that and you can donate whatever you can to the show.
And we always appreciate every donation, no matter how small. And
Correct.
as always, stay safe, stay informed, and remember, you are not alone.